Congressman Kelly Armstrong joins me for this episode of the Playing Talk podcast. Kelly, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
We should start off talking with baseball, obviously the most important thing. What do you think? It sounds like they're throwing around the idea of an 82-game season, which would be, about half of a normal season. What are you looking forward to? At this point, I'd just be happy if they play. I think there's a lot of hot air going around about, is it a real season? If they play, it's a real season, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it's always going to have an asterisk next to it, but let's just play ball.
I agree. I mean, it's going to be different. It's going to be, it probably give us a pretty good idea of how people are comfortable doing anything. But on just a personally selfish note, if I keep watching old Greg Maddux games on the MLB network, my wife's probably going to move into a different room. So
I keep watching.
I need new baseball.
I keep watching that old YouTube video of 1998. The Yankees versus the Orioles, Armando Benitez beans Tino Martinez, and all hell breaks loose, and ultimately gets a punch from Darryl Strawberry that I'm pretty sure Armando Benitez's grandchildren could feel.
Yeah, that was a good one. The Pedro Martinez Don Zimmer one was a good one.
Yeah, I mean, come on, beating up an old man, that's not very. Don Zimmer was 100 years old, and he probably wasn't, but he looked it.
Pedro's one of my favorite pitchers in the world, but I'm not sure who I'd bet on in that fight.
Yeah, well, that's true. Oh, and Pedro was, for all the frustration he gave us Yankee fans, was unbelievable. Unbelievable pitcher. All right, enough baseball. Although really we could say baseball's having the same debate the rest of the country is right now about how quickly do we open? When do we open? What can be open? What should still be closed? It's a difficult debate. It's creating a lot of rancor in North Dakota. It's creating a lot of rancor nationally. But generally, I'm sensing from the public a desire to get back to normal or some semblance of normal, or at least start heading in that direction. I kind of feel like there's a consensus around that at this point.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the poll numbers, like when you see it polled and all of that, it is, social distancing and we're doing the right thing health-wise seems to poll well. But then also at the same time, I think, it's one of those deals where people are starting to do more. They just, every day they're doing a little more. They're being careful, but they're getting out. I noticed it. I was in D.C. last week and I flew home on Saturday, and there were there's still by no means a lot of people on airplanes or in the airport, but
really, because I've been hearing people have been
starting to be more people.
People messaging me. They're going to Denver. They're going to Minneapolis. They're saying the flights are packed. The ones that they're on. I don't know.
Well, I think part of that's because there's a lot less flights.
Yeah, I'm sure that's probably true. And some of those polls nationally. The problem is if you ask me do you approve of social distancing? Well, yeah. But I also think, we've all been going to the grocery store throughout this, and we seem to be doing okay there. I think most of us believe, we can continue social distancing. Don't, run around, licking people's faces or something. But, not that people did that normally. But, you know what I mean. I think most people are like, yes, let's be cautious, but let's also get back to work.
Yeah, and everything. And it's all skewed on coverage, which is a longer conversation. We had a meeting on the White House on Friday, and there's been numerous stories written about how none of the congressmen at that meeting were wearing masks. And I read one yesterday that and all the reporters were wearing masks. Well, yeah, the reporter that was the most mad about it and apoplectic about it was wearing a mask. It was around his chin. It didn't cover his nose or his mouth as he was lecturing us all about how we were participating in a meeting. So, I guess he was wearing one.
Yeah.
That's what I'm worried about. All this stuff is turning into a new realm of virtue signaling.
Right. Well, I think that's right. I guess I could tie a mask around my elbow and walk around and tell everybody I'm wearing the mask.
Hey, if wearing masks helps us get going faster, I'm all for it. But I also, they're not a magic wand to stop COVID, particularly when they're not worn properly and all of those things. But if somebody asks me to wear one in their establishment, I will. Airlines want you to wear it when you're on the plane. I do that. But I don't. And if it helps, I hope. I mean, anything that helps, but I just don't want it to
right.
turn into congratulations, you get a sticker. You care more.
I think the people who are indignant and like to try to virtue signal, like you said, people who aren't wearing masks, on the same coin, I mean, there's been some people out there who are just sort of intransigent, saying, I'm not going to do anything. You know, I'm not going to, in fact, I'm going to do dangerous things. Like, don't do that either. Right? Like, don't be on either end of that idiot spectrum. Like, let's try to be reasonable and in the middle and do what you can to not spread the virus, protect yourself and protect others. But also, like, let's not, you know, be a bunch of Karens going around angry about, you know, oh, you're not wearing a mask, says the guy whose mask is down around his chin. Come on.
Exactly. And, you know, one of the things I think that's going to end up happening over this is, and this is really a North Dakota thing, people have to stay home when they're sick. I've worked a lot of different places in my life, and we almost wear it like a badge of honor showing up to work if we're sick or all of those things.
Yeah,
and
that's such a North
that
Dakota
is something
thing.
I really do hope changes.
Yeah, especially with men. I think women tend to be smarter about that. Men, for some reason, both that and also our resistance to going to the doctor. Right, like I hear, and I've done it. Like, you brag about, like, I don't go to I had a heart attack. I just, you know, took some Tylenol, took a nap, went back to work. Like, stop doing that to yourself. You're not accomplishing anything. That doesn't make you tough. That makes you an idiot.
And plus, when we get back opening a little bit, our hospitals and our clinics are going to need the business because they've really been crushed by this.
Isn't that a weird thing?
Reasons.
We were so worried about the hospitals being overwhelmed. And yet the bigger problem we're facing right now is that the hospitals aren't getting enough business because people are postponing their normal appointments or their normal care that they would be accessing.
You know, that's a metric that's going to be really interesting to try and figure out when we get out of this is, you know, I mean, this goes back to what you were just saying. People will consider anything an elective procedure if they don't have to do it. And I worry there's a lot of people maybe not getting the medical treatment they actually need right now. But it'll be, I mean, it's obviously going to be hard to figure that out. But if you need to go to the doctor, you should. You might want to call ahead, make some plans. But if you need to, you should. And there are certain things that are not elective procedures. And so if you have a medical issue, go get it done.
Well, talking about idiots, I don't need much of an excuse to avoid going to the doctor. I will find any excuse that I can. Oh, it's raining outside. I can't possibly go. Yeah, don't do that. Go get the care you need. Take precautions, but get the care you need. So in Congress, I mean, we got the checks. I mean, it's been such a fluid situation. I think it's been hard for a lot of people to track. Is there more recovery efforts coming from Congress? I mean, what's the focus right now in terms of what Congress is going to do next as we try to move past this thing?
Well, I think this is where you're starting to see a pretty significant divide. It sounds like Speaker Pelosi will introduce some form of legislation either sometime this week, and we could vote on it, I think, as early as Friday, but I'm thinking the longer we go, it'll go into next week. But there has been no consultation with Republicans on anything regarding this bill. My personal feeling on this is we've put all in with, if you count the multipliers, we're getting north of $6 trillion into the economy. That hasn't deployed yet. I mean, just all of it hasn't deployed yet. And we're starting to see economies start opening back up. There is going to be more legislation. My hope is that it's targeted and it really tries to address cracks in the other legislation, tighten some of those things up. We're going to have to address those things, but we're starting to hear that this new package is north of $2 trillion again. And I don't see how that is responsible at this point in time.
Do you? I saw you where you were tweeting the other day, and I think you were quoting from Political Playbook, saying that Pelosi's bill was just sort of a laundry list of a kind of a left wing wish. I'm forgetting the term, but it's like a liberal wish list or a left wing wish list.
Well, and that's where you're going to see it. And they tried to sneak in Green New Deal legislation into the last bill, and I mean, she has her own caucus and her own conference to deal with, but. You can't. I mean, you're the most popular person in town when you're raining money, and
right.
that's just always the truth. but there has to be some guardrails in this.
Well,
and we need to take some guardrails on what we've done.
You have a lot of friends when you're putting all the drinks and the meals and everything on your credit card bill, but those friends are nowhere to be found when it's time to pay that credit card bill.
Well, and again, what ends up happening is we deal with non-COVID related things in what should be particularly right now COVID related legislation. I don't think I like the Kennedy Center. I like art. I was on the North Dakota my wife actually was on the North Dakota Museum of Art board. It's one of my favorite places, but I don't think the Kennedy Center had a whole lot to do with COVID. And when you continue to do those things, you make people happy, but you don't have a bill that has a chance of passing a Republican Senate. That's the problem.
I like art too. I love museums. I love all types of museums. I love history museums. I love art museums. I love libraries. I love all of those things, but I always tell my friends who are on the boards of those initiatives or whatever, because it's like, a lot of them say, oh, you're a conservative, so you're this Philistine and you don't like this stuff. And the thing is I do like it. But I think a lot of times when you guys, when the public feels like you guys are sneaking your funding into other bills and we're not having a debate about the merit of the funding itself, and instead sometimes it feels like the funding's a little sneaky. And I think it'd be better off. And I
budget
think
bills in D.C. are the ones that always do that.
Right. So don't do that. I honestly, I think if you put public libraries before the public, they'll support it on its own merits. And I'm picking on libraries here, but whether it's arts funding or whatever, I think people are willing to support that stuff on its own merits. I think if we just have
or better yet, put a board together that's good at raising private money.
Right.
And that's the best way to handle it.
Yeah. Well, and some of the stuff we've done in North Dakota with matching public dollars to private dollars, and we'll give you a boost, but go get out there and establish your own private base of support as well. I think a lot of that kind of stuff can work. I tell you what. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, yeah, and that's a great way to maximize private donations too, because then they know that. It's kind of an all of the above for a funding stream, and we've done a good job of that in North Dakota. I've been the president of a nonprofit out here. That's the definition of how we get things done, particularly in smaller communities. So, it tends to work and then they're successful because everybody's invested in it. The local is, the government is, the businesses are, and then they work.
Should we talk energy for a minute?
Sure.
More than a minute, I have a feeling, because there's a lot going on. Coal Creek Station, we got that news since the last time you and I talked. I know that there's a lot of hard feelings in central North Dakota about it right now. I don't think it helped that the CEO of Great River Electric accidentally sent out an email to all of his employees of one of his cooperative members kind of spiking the football, really delighted, I guess, that Coal Creek Station is closing and kind of indifferent to the economic impact that represents for North Dakota. But that aside, I guess the one question I had for you is, Governor Burgum, Senator Hoeven, Senator Kramer, and yourself all said in your press releases that went out responding to the announced close of that plant that you guys intend to find a way to keep it open. And I'm wondering how that happens, because the way it stands now, Great River Energy is saying, they're going to keep their transmission line, right? So if whoever buys the plant doesn't get the transmission line to transmit that energy into Minnesota, so they'd have to find a new way to transmit it. How does that even work as a practical matter? And if Great River Energy's out there saying, look, we're losing money on this plant, who's going to buy it?
Well, so first of all, I think our responsibility as government is to resilient and reliable grid. And there is no doubt that Coal Creek can participate and is an absolute asset for those types of things. So the big question is, the government shouldn't get involved in buying the plant. What we should do is make sure that we are helping bridge conversations in any way we can between potential buyers, utilities who need extra power, those types of things. Understand what government restrictions that exist from them doing that, and seeing if whether at the federal level, the state level, the county level, or all three, most likely, we can work towards making sure to ease those burdens to make it more attractive to private investors.
Do you feel, yesterday I had, and I know he's a friend of yours as well, Ladd Erickson from McLean County. He's a state's attorney. I had him on the last podcast before this one, and one argument that he made is he feels like the state of North Dakota ought to treat the coal plant and the transmission line as one piece of infrastructure. If Great River Energy wants to tear down their coal plant, then they should tear down the transmission line as well. And his argument is when this was built, this was a controversial thing. And I wasn't even aware of this. He clued me into this book by Paul Wellstone about the building of the transmission line that serves Coal Creek and feeds full Coal Creek power into Minnesota. And he's talking about, like, there was a farmer uprising. They didn't want this thing built across their land. They were toppling. I mean, there were some issues. They were, I guess, physically impeding the construction. They were toppling like some of the towers. And his argument is, well, the way it was sold to North Dakota is, okay, you were going to build this transmission line across all this North Dakota farmland, but the benefit to North Dakota is you get a coal plant that's going to have, it's going to generate commerce and it's going to, create jobs and everything else. His argument is, okay, well, if the economic side for North Dakota part of that equation goes away, maybe the transmission line should go away as well. I realize that those decisions are maybe a little out of your wheelhouse as a congressman, but what do you feel about? How do you feel about that?
Well, so I tend to get a little nervous, and we do this a lot sometimes on our side, depending on what it is. But government should not determine what private business is and is not allowed to do. We can disagree with GRE's decision, and I wish they would be keeping that open. And their co-op members in Minnesota's ideology is something that I argue against a whole lot on a daily basis. But by doing restrictive government, coming in and however the deal was made. And looking at it that way and making sure you don't do that. I think the better approach is to try and facilitate a scenario where where both GRE is willing to sell the plant and possibly the DC line and have reasonable, reliable power that doesn't necessarily go to Minnesota. But we can keep it around here.
And I agree with you. I am equally skeptical about government telling private businesses what they can do, even private businesses that are doing things that you and I might disagree with. I think that's a very dangerous road to go down, and I don't really want to go down it. But in this instance, they used the power of eminent domain to build that transmission line. That's a government
I would
power.
have to look at I have no doubt that Ladd has studied that background. Anybody who knows Ladd knows that. I don't know enough about it, but that is that changes things a little bit, and you could probably have that conversation. But at the end of the day, I don't think we're doing anybody in central North Dakota or our electric grid a whole lot of good if we're, trying to pick a fight with somebody who's, essentially leaving that business and at least from that regards, transitioning to things in other states. I'm more interested in figuring out how we save those economies and save those jobs.
Yeah.
And the best way I can think of to do that is just hopefully figure out a way to help facilitate a situation where somebody, coal's it's still the most reliable energy you can put on the grid.
Well, because everybody's talking about cheap gas. Well, there's a lot of gas that's produced in the United States that's a byproduct of oil production. And you look at the number of oil wells that are being capped right now. Gas prices aren't high enough to produce gas on its own. That's a tough place. We've enjoyed low gas prices for a long time. I'm not sure we can count on that going into the future. I don't know what the future holds.
In Pennsylvania, which is primarily gas wells, they're not associated gas. They're shutting those in as well, and that's always been the danger with gas. Gas is an internationally traded commodity. It's been down for over a decade now, but at some point in time, it won't be. And you don't have to go very far to look at this. Germany's burning more coal now than when they started their clean power plant. Now, their issue was they kind of went away from nuclear, realized their offshore wind was not baseload, and didn't want Vladimir Putin controlling their entire economy with only having one place to get natural gas. But all the cost increase that's happened to coal is because of regulation. It's still as cheap as it is to get it out of the ground, get it to your plant, and burn it. And it's also reliable, and it doesn't have a commodity-based economy backing it. So it's definitely more stable.
At this point, we know where all the coal is. And we know, we have a good idea of how much it's going to cost to get it out of the ground and get it where it needs to be. And in North Dakota, where it needs to be is almost literally across the street. I mean, figuratively, but our plants are pretty much, Coal Creek anyway is right on top of the Falkirk mine. There's almost no transportation at all. So, you know, anyway, we've had that debate. Let's talk oil a little bit. We got some good news from the Pipeline and Hazardous Material Safety Administration. I'm not sure if I'm getting that acronym right.
Yes.
The federal pipeline regulators, they came out and the federal government has essentially said that the state of Washington cannot restrict oil shipments into their state, because what
Yes.
Washington does, sort of reacting to some hyperbole from the environmentalists about bomb trains and everything else. The state of Washington said, you know, we don't want Bakken crude coming into our state, which is tough because, you know, that was a big market. There's a refinery getting North Dakota oil out to the West Coast into Washington. That's a big market. That's a big deal for the North Dakota oil field. So that was good news. But the other thing is, what I thought was really interesting is what's going on with some of our judges, because we have a couple of situations. One is the Keystone XL pipeline, which is of somewhat importance to the state of North Dakota. But there's a judge in Montana who basically vacated a permit that was issued by the U.S. Army
Corps of Engineers Permit 12.
Permit 12, right. National Permit 12. It basically vacated it and ended up impacting infrastructure projects across the country. Now he has since come back and sort of limited his own opinion a little bit. But I have a problem living in the sort of society that we're supposed to be living in, where one judge, a federal judge, who's a political appointee, who doesn't ever have to sit on a ballot, can make what is essentially a policy decision for the entire country in response to litigation before his court. And this happens a lot because the Dakota Access Pipeline right now, we have a judge in Washington, D.C., Judge Boasberg, who I think for the most part, looking at his opinions through the fight over the Dakota Access Pipeline, I think has been reasonable, but is currently hearing arguments about whether or not because he has already ordered further review of the Dakota Access Pipeline, which is already operating, but now he's hearing arguments about whether or not it could be shut down. And he has that power. I guess if he's persuaded, he could just shut down that pipeline that's already operating. Kelly, I feel like these judges have too much power with this ability to enjoin.
I think the single biggest thing we can do, and here's the real, and now we're getting into what I used to do for a living. Here's the real danger with this is particularly we see this in the environmental lobby. It's sue and sue and sue, and you can forum shop. And if you don't like a decision in one particular area, you tweak one particular thing and you just sue it in another federal district. And you can, essentially anywhere, any district that pipeline touches, and oftentimes like with the DC district court doesn't have to touch there. You can get one judge to say it, and it completely shuts things down all across the country. We've seen this in the immigration fights with judges. Nationwide injunctions are one of the biggest problems we have with the judiciary right now. Not the fact that you can issue them, because there are scenarios where they are necessary, but the fact that they are done so often. And I think oftentimes when we talk about conservative versus liberal judges, we view it sometimes in the partisan side of it, of conservative versus liberal. But when I look at the difference between conservative versus liberal judges, I look at it if they're going to be conservative in their rulings and their applications of their rulings versus doing it nationwide all the time.
Are they going to have restraint? More are they going to have restraint? Are they going to be willing to say, well, I want to put a pin in things, but I'm just going to do it for this specific case, as opposed to I'm going to put a pin in things, everything nationwide?
Exactly, because the Corps has canceled their nationwide their Permit 12 program. They aren't doing them right now. That doesn't just affect pipelines. That affects any infrastructure project that needs that permit to cross essentially any kind of water.
It could be a water.
Telecommunication, fiber optic.
It could be a water pipeline. It could be water.
Yeah.
I mean, so something as benign as that, and they can't build maybe a needed water project for some part of the country. One's not coming to mind, but I mean, to me that's a real problem. It's too much power to have in judges. So what can be done about it? Now, I know Congress has the authority to define the jurisdiction for the courts, right? Is Congress going to exercise that authority?
Well, I think I will tell you this. No, we aren't. I wish we would. I wish we would take it up. I will tell you, I've thought about this a lot, and how you write it. I mean, how you deal with some of that, because you have to write it on the front end. I mean, you can't go after each and every individual ruling, and you want to still be able to protect the independence of the judiciary. The single best way we handle this is what President Trump and Senator McConnell have done, and that's get the right people on the bench all across the country. Like you said, they're lifetime appointments. Once they're appointed, they're not really accountable to anybody other than the law. And so the single best way to handle that problem is appointing the right kind of judges, because you still have to have the ability to have nationwide injunctions. There are places where you need them. But what you need is judges that are using that very sparingly and only as a last resort. And that's how I wish every judge approved that. I mean, it's okay to issue. I mean, if it's your district and you disagree with something and you think you have a legal case for it, you have the right to issue that injunction. I just don't think a judge in Montana should be stopping a project in Branson, Missouri.
A project that he knows nothing about. Probably is not even aware of. I mean, there's no way that judge in Montana knows the specifics of every one of those projects that he inhibited or hindered with his ruling. And again, he has since cut it down, but still, that's a problem. I mean, because it just think of the uncertainty. I mean, these projects take billions of dollars. Sometimes it's coming from the private markets. Sometimes maybe it's a public project and it's being bonded by some county or some municipality or what have you. The amount of uncertainty that injects into the process makes those projects harder to build, makes them more expensive to build, makes them take longer to build, because nobody's certain, well, okay, I'm going to start building this thing, but halfway through, is some judge going to issue an injunction and now I got to stop? That can't be how it is.
The product more expensive to the consumer at the end of the day.
Well,
it doesn't matter if it's internet, it doesn't matter if it's natural gas, it doesn't matter if it's gasoline in a car. When you do this, I mean, that's the one thing I do think is fairly not most of the people who are making the rulings on this have never raised capital, went through the permitting process, done this kind of work, this business pipelines go from state to state, and you're dealing with, different county commissions, let alone the federal government. And every time you do something like this, you put another truck on the road or another rail car on the road, and you increase the transportation cost for whatever product you're moving.
Because that's the thing, is we're all still using these products too. I mean, everybody in America pretty much is using oil today in one form or another.
And never have the policy and the politics of environmental issues been more front and center than pipelines. People would be shocked to know how much pipe is already under the ground. I don't care where you live, anywhere in the country, but it's the definition of when it's working well. Nobody knows it's there.
Right.
So every leak is magnified, every spill is magnified, but it is the cheapest and safest way to move oil, to move natural gas, and to get it to market. And that is an absolute fact.
Here's the thing.
We need more pipeline, not less.
And we'll wrap this up here in a couple minutes. But here's the thing, and this really frustrates me about the pipeline fights and even transmission line fight, all these fighting when we do. I don't mind a rigorous process, and I don't mind a good Donnybrook over a pipeline at the onset, right? Like, okay, we're going to have a process. It's going to be an arduous process. I wish it could be less arduous, but hey, not everybody in the world agrees with me on pipelines. So it's going to be a contentious process. That's fine. But there's got to be a finish line. Like, I'm all for protest, flood the hearing rooms of the regulatory meetings, do all of those things, lobby lawmakers, even file lawsuits, right? I don't have a problem. But there's got to be some point at which, okay, we're just going to build it survived all of these things. We're just going to build the pipeline. We have built the Dakota Access Pipeline. It is pumping oil today, and we are still fighting. It still might be shut down. That can't be. There's a point at which you just got to say, listen, we had the debate. You lost. It's over. Move on.
Otherwise, people are going to quit investing in those infrastructure projects that are absolutely necessary for our society to function the way it is.
And then we're going to become more and more reliant on creaky old infrastructure, and we're going to grow its ability. We're not going to outgrow the capacity of that infrastructure. And then what? Prices are going to go up. The cost of living is going to go up. We're going to see more spills because like the Line 3 pipeline project, which isn't even a new pipeline. They're just trying to replace an old pipeline that's already in use. And
they're actually making it less safe by fighting that. Yes,
exactly my point. So how do we get to a point where there is a finish line? We had the debate, and it's over, right? It's like the campaign. That's all we've gotten away from it there as well. But there's a point at which you campaign, and we have a debate. This guy should be in office. No, this gal should be in office. And we go back and forth. But then we have the election. At that point, there's a finish line. Now it's time to govern. Right? There should be a finish line, and we don't have enough finish lines anymore.
I agree. And I mean, and the other thing is, and one of the ways that I think we can start doing this, and the other issue, and this goes for all these infrastructure projects, I'm glad you brought up the Washington case because it's really important. And it's really important from anybody who needs access to ports that lives in the center of the country. Doesn't matter if you're a soybean farmer or you're producing, whatever you're shipping out of North Dakota, Minnesota, Nebraska, South Dakota. I'm a states' rights guy, but I actually do believe, I think the Interstate Commerce Clause is oftentimes used too much for different areas.
But it does exist for a reason. This is an area
where we absolutely need the federal government to step in because we cannot have liberal coastal governors determining what products we can ship to and from places from North Dakota. That cannot happen.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree with that. I mean, the Interstate Commerce Clause, as much as it's been the bane of the existence of federalists and conservatives for a long time, does exist for a good reason when it's used appropriately.
Yeah, there's a reason we want uniform weight limits for trucks, so you don't have one state on an interstate highway being able to stop trucks that are, again, hauling ag products from North Dakota. I mean, there are places where it's very important, and one of the places where it's very important is for internal states in the United States being able to have access to markets. And to have access to markets, we need access to the federal ports. And in order to do that, sometimes we have to go through states who have, well, let's just say, environmentally unreasonable governors.
Yeah. Well, that's for sure. Well, Kelly, I think I've used up all of your time that I'm allotted today, but I certainly appreciate you coming on. Like you, I'm hoping for baseball to come back soon, except for the Mets. Who cares about the Mets? There's something. I saw some list where I tweeted you about it. There's some list where people miss the Mets. Yeah, right. Nobody cares about the Mets.
Best pitcher in the National League, baby.
Yeah. All right, Kelly.
Is he not?
Yeah, no, I think he is. I think you're right.
Okay. I just got you to say something nice about the Nets.
Okay.
That's a perfect time to leave.
All right. Now we're definitely ending this podcast. Kelly, thanks for your time.
See ya.